All right. Hi, and welcome to Grant Writing in the Age of AI. Um, I'm one of the co-hosts, Melody Hernandez. I also have Fielding Jezreel and a bunch of participants today to talk about all things grant related or all things AI related as it relates to the grant sector. So, I have a couple things on my mind since we last met, but I'm going to open it up in case anyone came with any topics that they are very passionate about discussing today. How are folks feeling about AI in their grant work? And
I
I,
just think it's a really interesting time period to be associated with anything related to grants or development or AI and so the mix of all of it together is like, wow, this is really interesting. That's my high level overview comment.
yeah,
I
There's a lot going
totally
on. That's the
agree. I totally agree with that that sentiment, but at the same time I just kind of do have to admit I do have a um kind of a I don't know the right word, but just a worry about what is my role in using AI? And I feel like my little project is not causing any problems. I feel like what I'm doing is totally ethical, but participating in the larger AI in our society just gives me great concern. And I don't really know what to do with that right now. And in the meantime, I'm kind of continuing to use the tool. So those are my thoughts. That's where I am right now.
yeah, yeah. I think a lot of us feel that, right? Is like, sometimes maybe comparing it to like driving a car. Like we know that there's a lot of pollution that's happening and a lot of and that cars contribute to that. And yet, not many of us have switched to a car-free lifestyle. And that can be a struggle, right? Especially when we're working in the nonprofit sector and especially when we're working, I've been working this morning on a workforce development grant. And it's like, well, AI is adversely impacting pathways into a lot of careers. And, you know, and so I'm like, I don't want AI taking over these jobs that, are that we're, building this program around. And we also need workforce to prepare people for how to use workforce development grants to prepare people for how to, yeah, it's hard. It's hard because a lot of times the purpose, if we're writing a grant about the environment, and I have actually found that the folks that I work with that are working in environmental spaces are the first to use AI. And I'm always like, just my personal experience. And I'm like, really? But it is, people are using it. Um,
And I like your car analogy because it, the idea that if we didn't want to drive our car, it's actually really hard, right? Like, do you live in a space with a bus system that's efficient, or are you going to take 20 minutes to get somewhere and 2 hours to get home, which is my scenario, right? Are roads built for safety on a bicycle? In St. Louis, no, I don't
mhm,
feel good on a bicycle. And so I like that analogy because it takes into account the context that makes it hard to do the thing. So even if you want to have a small AI footprint, we're often not given that option, right? We don't have the option to log into Facebook and not have an AI footprint. We're not given the option to use a streaming service and opt out of having an AI output. We're not given the option to buy something online and not have AI be part of that process. So we're really, yes, we can talk all day about individual usage, but there is so much in the context that we just don't have the ability to control for.
yeah, yeah. And maybe it wouldn't be so integrated if, data centers were held accountable for, uh, paying for the water that they're using and the electricity that they're using at the rate they're using it, like at a higher rate than what a household would be paying, right? Like, if you're guzzling that much of our natural resources, there should be some kind of, I mean, more than just financial compensation, but at least some financial compensation that's used to then offset those, right? So, I think those are things that, a lot of times it does come back to policy and who you vote for and how you show up in those spaces and how you advocate, um, and all that good stuff. Fielding, I saw you put something about watermarks in the chat. And yes, that was one of the things that was on my mind to talk about.
Yeah. So Claude recently, in the last couple of weeks, released a whole lot of fairly transparent information about how they are watermarking their AI output. So the idea is that, um, when we as writers use the phrase watermark, we think of something visible on a page that is like, this is my work, and I have watermarked it so people don't steal it. And so, the first thing I want to mention is that when we talk about AI watermarks, we're not talking about a visible mark. This is not something that someone could visibly scan and say, oh, this is Claude AI or this is ChatGPT. I'm going to get to that in a second. So, what we use these words in the AI sphere that often don't mean the same thing as they mean in real life. So the first thing I want everyone to really understand is there's nothing visible on a page of paper that you print out that was created by AI that anyone could be like, this is 100% from Claude. Now, can most of us look at AI slop and be like, that's AI slop? Yes, right? So, what is the difference? And what do they mean by watermark? Well, essentially, they've decided that they're going to select certain words in relationship to other words at a frequency that would likely indicate that the thing had been produced by their AI. So, a couple of things to note. Number one, it might make AI worse, right? Because the value of AI is that it chooses words in a multi-dimensional sphere and it's trying to choose the best word. But if they decided that elegant and complex are close enough and that they're going to use the word complex when it's near fabric instead of elegant, that's probably going to make the AI worse, right? So there's a lot of critique right now that this could potentially make the language less precise. It's also going to be hard to use in practice when something is short, like a title of a webinar, right? Or even like one page of material. There's only 3,000 characters on that page or less, right? Now, when you get to book length, would that watermark be more clear? Yes, absolutely. So, what does this all mean? I think it means freaking nothing.
Yeah.
For us as users, as like grant professionals, it means zero. And everyone's making this huge deal out of it. And they're like, funders are going to be able to tell, and everybody's going to know you're using AI. Number one, if you're using AI, you should not be ashamed and think that no one should know. Do you want your writing to be good enough that people don't trip up and get in their own head about whether it's AI? Yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, if you were trying to trick your funders, you're already doing it wrong.
Yeah. 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 And this, so from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fielding, as I know you always do. From my understanding, part of the reason they're doing this is because the EU has been trying
Correct.
to
Correct.
you know, really try to create some
Yeah.
policies around AI usage and trying to make it much more clear what is AI and what isn't AI.
Correct.
And my personal belief is that a lot of times part of kind of the capitalistic corporate mindset is to exactly what you said, make it meaningless, right?
Yeah.
We will do it and we will do it in a way that undermines the heart of what's trying to be accomplished
Yeah.
here. And so they're doing it literally by the letter of the law and in a way that isn't really fulfilling the thing that we're trying to get them to do, which is, you know, like you said, we should be doing our work in a way that we're like, this is what, we used AI, we use it as a tool, we use it, open, honest, transparent, and they're trying to not, right? That's really kind of what they're trying to cling to this thing of we want people to never be able to tell the difference between AI and what's
Yeah.
not. And I don't think that's good for society. I don't think it's good for society to always be wondering what what is real, right? And I think that becomes more that is important when it comes to writing, right? It's very important. I think it's personally right now where we're at with AI, I think it's more important when we're talking about visuals, right? I think it's much more important that like we have started to distrust our own eyes, right? And
Yeah.
our own what we see and what we believe. And too many people, I mean, I don't know if y'all are on Facebook and seeing, your parents or whomever posting this poor veteran who's missing all of his limbs and it's so obviously AI. Like I think
Yeah.
there's definitely there's AI savvy folks who can see through that and things like that. But man, there are way too many people out there that are being misled by by you know by images and text that is AI generated. And so I think it is helpful to say this is AI generated. And now I've noticed that Facebook has put like an AI like disclaimer on photos, and I've seen people say this is an actual photo. I just, there was
I
something in the
literally just
background I
took it.
removed. You know? And so, again, helpful or not helpful, right? To
Right.
say if somebody removes a blemish or something that's no AI content, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like one extreme to the other with this
Right.
sometimes, which I think is intentional because then all these like things that we're trying to do as a society so that we can still trust the things we see, the things we read, and we can still have a better understanding of, humans' role in that. I think they're trying to undermine that in a very intentional way so that the policies that are out there, so people say, oh, well, why should we even try? Because when we try, it doesn't really do anything anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think to your point, I think what the EU is really trying to do, and maybe more than what I'm about to say, but at least part of it is exactly that point. How do we make sure that um, individual AI companies can be held responsible for the content that gets created on their platforms, right? So there was a big news story also in the last couple of weeks about how ChatGPT, in a test scenario, its AI escaped. So it was trying to get it like it was set up. It had given a set of tasks, and in order to achieve the task, it actually jumped out of the container in which it had been told, like had been constructed for this test to run in. It accessed the internet. It hacked a company's server and got the information that it had been tasked with getting.
Okay, then how come when I try to use ChatGPT or whatever, and I'm like, check this website, it's like, oh, that's too hard for me. Sorry. What the heck? They're giving us the shitty version of these AIs, and I pay for
So
it.
the point is like, we need to know, like, humans, the public deserves to know if one of these tools is being used to create, something that is not safe for families, let's say, or is propaganda, right? And I
Mhm.
think the European Union wants to hold those companies accountable, just as they have held Facebook accountable for, allowing the posting of stuff that influenced elections, right? And so the EU is always way farther ahead than we are in trying to institute protections. And is this the right option? I don't know. But it is at least a glimpse of the larger problem, which is okay, well now Claude can be like, yeah, we see our stamp, we know this was us, but if Claude's really the only one that can figure that out, is that as useful as like they're the
Yeah.
ones who know what their watermarks are?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's uh yeah, I just feel like and oftentimes I think a lot of the politicians that are working to kind of create these kind of policies, regulations, whatever they are, I they're not often, it seems to me, from just kind of seeing them talk and reading what they're saying, like I feel like they might not always be the most tech savvy people. So
Yeah.
you have people who really don't understand the technology that they're trying to create policies around, creating and using usually, kind of more archaic language that, if you just ran it through a free version of ChatGPT and said, how do I get around this? It would be able to just do circles around those loopholes, right? And so, yeah, so I think it's, we are at, there's been increasingly, and, being the age that I'm at, that they call me a geriatric millennial. I am like the very first year of millennials, right? And to have seen how technology has moved so fast in my lifetime and how the law has moved so slowly, um, is and how technology is just like it is just ramping up to make even quicker uh changes that get adopted by users before it's even out of beta, right? And so and then the law is still trying to figure out, well, can we do anything about the internet? It's just like I feel like I'm a little concerned about even like the next 5 year period about what's going to happen, because I think, one thing that we know from history that happens is if we don't have, kind of this societal structure in place of rules, regulations, and uh really consequences for corporations, then, regular people end up just pulling out the pitchforks and the torches and saying, we'll just take care of this ourselves. So like I just feel like policy needs to catch up here, or people are going to take it into their own hands, you know. Uh-oh, I see we have SFPD on the line. I'm not endorsing any of that. I'm talking about historical context.
I'm not an officer, so all good. Uh, they're happy I'm here. So because the officers don't want to write, so we're good.
Yeah, yeah. And sorry, do you mind if I ask, are you do grant work
Yes.
for
Yeah.
SFPD? Yeah. And
Hmm.
so I'm assuming that means a lot of federal grants,
A lot
state
of
and federal
federal.
grants.
Yep.
And are you seeing any, if you want to share, are you seeing any ways in which AI is making that change in any capacity?
I mean, I'll try finding the nicest way of saying this. AI is a very helpful tool for those who especially are not used to the grant writing or grant world, um, like many of my officers. But I wouldn't say it's having any issues right now with the federal grants or anything like that that I've seen. And that could just be because sometimes it's very obvious when an officer or sworn personnel has put in the NOFO and said, draft me up something. It's very obvious because uh, Copilot at least likes to put the line breakers in between. And I'm
Mm.
like, do you know how to do that on your own? And so most of the time they don't. So that right off the bat, I already know. And the way it's bolded and tied, like the structure of it, I can already tell from, what I get is just so clearly that's what they did. And they will happily admit that to me. So that's not a problem. But I do not use that as like what I submit. Now because I am a civilian and oftentimes I'm trying to make sure that what the sworn personnel is writing and what I'm writing is makes sense. I do use we have a secured version of Copilot, so it doesn't save anything. The city has an agreement with them. So I use that for like grammar and making sure like the sentence structure. But the fun thing about Copilot for at least sworn personnel is that because a lot of the information that police do is not public knowledge, that if you were to put in, draft me a proposal with, I'll just throw out drones because drones is a hot topic. 90% of the time, what they put in there is not accurate for at least the
Mm.
SF for San Francisco, because we also have quite a few limitations. So one time I just sent it off to a captain. He was like, "Where did you get this word?" And I was like, "I'm not gonna lie to you, sir. I got it on Copilot." He goes, "That's not relevant." And I was like, "I love that you read it, so thank you, because that's what you're supposed to do when I send you these things." But yeah, so I've learned, I've been here for almost a year now, that in that sense, I can't rely on, not that I was, but I can't rely on the co-pilot to give me accurate information when it comes to law enforcement or public safety even. And I think that's something I've always told a lot of my sworn personnel too, is that you can't rely on co-pilot. You know what you know, and Copilot knows, but it's very limited on online access. If what we have is not online public information, which majority of it is, but sometimes, there's sensitive topics, whatever. Um, only you are going to know that. I wouldn't even know that, which is why I have to still have that human interaction, and why I always remind people my job is very secured still.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially when it comes to folks who have some of the expertise of having, if you're not learning how to do grant work right now, I mean, I really feel bad for folks who are trying to learn how to do it at this point. But if you were
Yeah.
doing it without AI and now you're figuring out how to do it with AI, it's like, ooh, I got job security for a minute, right? Um,
Mhm.
However, one thing that Fielding and I talk about a lot is I think as AI is getting better and as folks are learning how to use it better, and as it is like, these conversations that we're having with funders of like, not gonna lie, 80% of this was AI written that we then, worked on. And as they're using AI to, create the NOFOs and the applications and this idea of like AI talking to AI, then why are we even doing this kind of thing, right? I do wonder about funders who are taking alternative routes to uh, you know, uh, decision making of how they're dispersing money. And I think we've seen a lot of folks like with foundations and things, they've started to become invitation only. Even I think for a while now we've seen where, it's just give us the short answer. You don't need to write pages and pages anymore. Nobody wants to read all that, right? So I think AI is also kind of contributing to like changes that are happening within how um how the decision making process is and whether or not, writing lots of pages of content is even going to be relevant to the process anymore. Which yeah, then I think just kind of reinforces that it is about, the strategy of it and less about the writing. But then for some of us, I know I got into this because I like to write. So that part I'm like, no, don't take that away.
Well, and Melody, I like that you've made the jump to the review process and coming off of Marissa's experience, because the Department of Justice, this also just happened this month. Department of Justice just announced that they're getting rid of their expert peer review. So for years, a lot of the DOJ grants are for equipment, right? Things like drones, things like cameras, things like metal detectors, whatever, a lot of like target hardening activity. Um, and they're going to not do that anymore. And so in my head, number one, presumably they'll still have staff reviews, which that would have already always been a part of the process just to make sure that applicants are eligible. But how much of that is going to be offloaded to AI? And I suspect quite a bit. And so, Marissa, I really appreciate you bringing up like, hey, we don't use this word, right? Because of like whatever it connotes, right? It maybe connotes something you don't actually do. Maybe it like doesn't feel good to community. Like there are a lot of reasons a word may or may not get used. But if AI is the thing doing the evaluation. It doesn't have context like that. And so you're going to lose a lot of the nuance that those of us who do love writing are putting into our proposals. We're losing that because then the reviewer doesn't understand why we're using certain words, doesn't pick up on that nuance necessarily, unless their AI has been trained to do that, and I kind of doubt it. So I think DOJ is an agency to watch closely. I think this is tip of the iceberg. I think we're gonna see this happen across a lot of federal agencies. But I think they're an early adopter of getting rid of expert review panels, and so I think we kind of have to watch to see, like, do we think the evaluation is happening primarily by AI, and then the political appointee of that agency is
Mhm.
then making last minute decisions. Like it's just really what all we really know is that they're not going to be using those experts anymore. We don't really know what that process is going to look like moving forward.
I assume it's going to be just like what happened. Was it last, maybe 2 years, well, year and a half last year, whatever it was now, when DEI and how they just control all the words DEI. And because at that time I was working for a university. And so a lot of our grants were getting flagged because for like NSF, you
Yeah.
had to have in there a section about diversity. Like it was required by the NOFO. And we were like, and so later, when after they had, flagged our application or grant that we already had, they were like, "Oh, never mind," because it was already like a required component. You just have to ignore that component. And we were like, so I assume that the same thing would happen as if they were to say AI, like, "Hey, look up the word for this." There's going to be a lot of miscommunication, I'm sure.
Yeah. 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 And I think that, that really is kind of bringing to attention some ways in which grant making maybe should be making some changes, right? Now, do I fully believe that as a result those changes are going to be positive? No, because I feel like so often they head in the wrong direction with stuff like this. Like, like I do notice a lot of like, oh, going back to videos or phone calls and stuff in lieu of a written proposal. And hey, guess what, y'all? Those phone calls and videos reinforce people giving funding to people who are from the same background as them, who look like them, who talk like them, you know? So kind of really reinforcing, a lot of things that we try to move away from with a more, fair and equitable process of a written proposal, which was kind of the idea of some of that. Stop just having it be about who you know and who you know how to talk to and who has the most charisma, and have it be more about a fair process, right? Um, and I know we are almost at time. I did see in the chat that there's like a comment about learn in the future talking more about learning grant writing now versus experience into the field prior to the shift of AI, because pivoting to AI over the last year has been a wild ride. Yes, definitely something we can talk more about on future calls. I think it is, for a lot of industries right now is about kind of learning how to kind of do that job while learning about how AI is changing that job and not always feeling like you're coming in the middle of a story kind of thing, right? I do have another space. I'm going to put it in the chat now. This is a link just to all my events that I have. Mondays, 10 a.m. Pacific. I'm on the West Coast. I do host a space called Grants, Gossip, and Guidance. It's very similar to this, except for it's not just AI. You can talk about anything, right? But just talking about anything grants related, sharing successes, complaining about clients. That space is not recorded. So join us there if you want to say anything off the record. And just generally connecting with other folks and talking about things like, how frustrating it can be to, you know, have to encounter some of the things we're encountering in 2026. Um, but yeah, thanks everyone for joining us and have a fabulous rest of your day. Bye
Thank you
all.
so much.
Bye. Thanks.